The vast arena was alive with noise, the roars of alien spectators echoing across the massive structure. A pit at the center of the arena was filled with dust and the smell of sweat. Thousands of eyes stared down at the combatants below, waiting for the match to begin. The crowd was wild, buzzing with excitement for the upcoming battle. On one side stood the alien Gladiator, towering at least 8 feet tall. His body was covered in thick, tough scales, each one reflecting the light from above like armor. His arms were thick, his chest broad, and his eyes gleamed with confidence. He looked like a giant compared to most other creatures in the arena, and the other aliens in the crowd feared him. This was his domain, his stage. He had never lost a fight. His name was Kor, a gladiator from the planet Zathos. He had won hundreds of matches, each one more brutal than the last. The alien warriors around him whispered his name in awe. Kor had destroyed his opponents with raw strength, crushing them in hand-to-hand combat. No one had ever come close to defeating him, and no one believed this human would be any different. But the human Jack was standing in the other corner, looking out over the arena. He didn't have the towering height or the monstrous strength of his opponent. He wasn't an alien warrior with centuries of combat experience. He was just a Marine from Earth, a young man thrown into the pit by a twist of fate. He had been trained to fight, to endure, to survive. That was his strength. He had survived battles in space and fought on planets where the odds were stacked against him. But even he knew this would be his toughest challenge. The crowd jeered at him. The humans were the newcomers, a species that had just made their way into the wider galaxy. The other aliens thought they were weak, primitive even. To them, humans were just another species to look down on. They were curious about Earth, but didn't believe a human could stand against an alien gladiator like Kor. Jack didn't flinch at the insults. He stood tall, his back straight, his face calm. He had trained for this moment his entire life. He knew this wasn't just a fight for survival. This was a test. Not only for him, but for all of humanity. His heart raced, but he remained focused. He wouldn't back down. A loud gong rang through the arena, signaling the start of the match. Kor raised his massive arms and roared, stepping forward with heavy, thunderous steps. The ground shook beneath his feet. His grin stretched across, his face showing rows of sharp teeth. He was clearly enjoying the moment, savoring the fear of the human who dared to face him. Jack watched the gladiator closely. Kor's movements were slow and deliberate, filled with the confidence of someone who knew they couldn't be beaten. Jack wasn't fooled by his size or strength. He had seen stronger opponents fall. The key was knowing when to strike, when to move, when to use his environment. Kor launched himself forward with terrifying speed, his fist swinging toward Jack's face. The human Marine ducked just in time, feeling the rush of wind as the fist passed mere inches from his head. Jack rolled to the side, quickly getting back on his feet. Kor spun, using his long tail to lash out. Jack jumped backward, narrowly avoiding the strike. The crowd gasped. They had expected the human to be crushed instantly. But Jack wasn't going down without a fight. He was agile, quick, and his mind was always working, analyzing the movements of his opponent. He could already tell that Kor was overconfident, maybe even too confident. His attacks were wild, almost careless. Jack needed to stay calm. The first few minutes were the hardest. His body was still adjusting to the intense heat of the arena and the pressure of the crowd's eyes. But this was what he had trained for. He had been in worse situations before. The alien gladiators underestimated humans, but that was their mistake. He had learned to fight not just with his strength, but with his mind. He didn't have the raw power Kor did, but he could outthink him. Kor swung again, this time aiming for Jack's chest. The force of the blow would have crushed any other fighter, but Jack twisted at the last moment, the punch grazing his shoulder. He gritted his teeth, pain shooting through him, but he refused to let it show. He couldn't afford to show weakness. The alien gladiator growled, enraged at the human's ability to dodge his attacks. He swung his fists again and again, but Jack was always one step ahead, dodging and weaving, using his smaller frame to his advantage. He was starting to tire Kor out, making the massive alien waste his energy. Jack knew it wouldn't be long before Kor made a mistake. And when he did, Jack would be ready. The crowd roared with excitement, some of them cheering for Core, others shouting insults at the human. The noise was deafening, but Jack focused on the fight. He could feel the sweat dripping down his back, his muscles aching, but he pushed on. This wasn't just a fight for his life. It was a fight for humanity's pride, for their place in the galaxy. Core paused for a moment, his breathing heavy. Jack saw his chance. The alien's overconfidence had made him slow down, and Jack moved in quickly, closing the distance between them. With a swift movement, he kicked Core's leg out from under him, making the giant alien stumble. The crowd fell silent. They had never seen a human move like this, never thought a human could keep up with Core. Jack's heart raced, but he kept his focus. This was just the beginning. Core snarled, his eyes burning with fury as he regained his balance. The Gladiator would come at him even harder now. Jack knew it, but he was ready. He wasn't going to back down. Not now. Not ever. The arena was filled with the deafening roar of the crowd, their excitement boiling over as they watched the battle unfold. Core, the mighty alien gladiator, had just stumbled. The massive creature was not used to being outmaneuvered, and now he was angry. His pride, which had been his greatest strength, was starting to crack. For the first time, he saw his opponent not as an easy target but as a threat. Jack, on the other hand, was focused. His heart was pounding in his chest, but his mind was sharp. He had seen Core's movements, analyzed them, and now he was starting to see the alien's weaknesses. Core's strength was unmatched, but his size and overconfidence made him slower than he realized. Jack had been trained to fight in all kinds of situations, and he had faced odds just as impossible before. But this was different. This was about more than just survival. This was about showing the galaxy what humanity was capable of. Core recovered quickly, his fury turning into a rage that made him more dangerous than ever. He bared his sharp teeth and let out a terrifying roar, charging at Jack with all his might. Jack didn't move. He stood his ground, watching the gladiator come toward him with heavy steps, his fists raised to strike. The crowd held their breath, waiting for the final blow that would end the fight. But Jack had no intention of just standing there. At the last moment, he sidestepped to the right, using Core's momentum against him. The alien warrior crashed into the ground, his massive body hitting the dirt with a loud thud. For a moment, the arena was silent. It had never happened before. An alien gladiator, a beast of strength and size, was on the ground, struggling to get up. The human had done it. Jack had outsmarted him. Core roared in anger as he scrambled to his feet, his face twisted with frustration. This was not how it was supposed to go. He was the champion of the arena, the pride of his people, and this human was making him look foolish. His pride was on the line, and there was no way he would let a tiny human best him. But Jack wasn't done. He had been in worse situations than this. He had survived battles in war zones, faced enemies far stronger than Core, and always come out on top. His mind was focused on one thing: winning. Not just for himself, but for all of humanity. He knew the galaxy was watching, and he would not let them see him fail. Core, now more desperate than ever, lunged at Jack with both fists raised, aiming to crush him under his massive arms. Jack dodged to the side again, his movements quick and precise. He had learned to move like this in his training, fast, unpredictable, and always one step ahead. He couldn't match Core's strength, but he didn't need to. All he had to do was survive, outlast, and wait for the right moment to strike. The gladiator's attacks were becoming more frantic, more reckless. He was no longer calculating or controlled. He was angry, and that made him dangerous. But it also made him easier to predict. Jack ducked under another swing and countered with a sharp punch to Core's ribs. The alien staggered, but Jack didn't let up. He followed up with a quick elbow to the back of Core's head. The giant gladiator shook it off, but now Jack could see it. The cracks in Core's defense were widening. The alien swung again, but this time Jack wasn't there. He had already moved behind him, placing his hands on Core's back and shoving him forward with all his strength. Core fell face first into the dirt, his body crashing to the ground with a resounding thud. The crowd gasped in shock. This wasn't supposed to happen. The gladiator was supposed to win, but the human had shown him up again. Core growled, his face red with fury. He was humiliated, and he wasn't going to take it anymore. He turned quickly, his tail sweeping across the ground, trying to knock Jack off balance. But Jack was already moving, leaping to the side and rolling out of the way. He had learned that speed was his best weapon. The slower Kor became, the more Jack could exploit his weaknesses. The alien gladiator got to his feet, his eyes burning with rage. He wasn't going to lose to this human. Not like this. He charged again, but this time Jack was ready. He had anticipated the move, and as Kor came within range, Jack dove toward him, grabbing his arm and twisting it with a quick, practiced motion. Kor roared in pain, but Jack didn't stop. He kept twisting, using his body weight to force Kor to the ground. The gladiator struggled, trying to break free, but Jack had him pinned. The human marine was on top now. For the first time in the fight, Kor's strength wasn't enough to overpower his opponent. Jack's training and intelligence were what kept him in the game. He wasn't just relying on brute force. He was using his mind to outsmart the gladiator. He could see Kor's desperation now, and it was clear that the giant alien was starting to realize just how dangerous Jack was. Kor's breath came in ragged gasps as Jack tightened his grip, pushing him further down. The alien's eyes widened, with a mixture of shock and disbelief. How could this human be so strong? How could he be so relentless? Jack wasn't the biggest or the strongest, but he was something Kor had never seen before: determined, strategic, and willing to fight. To the end, the crowd was silent now, watching as the once mighty gladiator was brought to his knees by the human. Jack could hear the whispers of surprise, the disbelief in the air. He didn't care about the crowd. He wasn't doing this for their approval. He was doing this for humanity, for Earth, and for himself. Kor finally stopped struggling, his body sinking lower into the dirt. He was tired, defeated. Jack had broken him, not physically but mentally. The alien gladiator, who had mocked the human and underestimated him at every turn, was now at Jack's mercy. Jack took a deep breath, his body sore and battered, but he stood tall. He had done it. He had shown the galaxy what humans were capable of, and he wasn't finished yet. The fight wasn't over until Kor admitted it was over. The silence in the arena was thick, as if the very air itself held its breath. Jack could hear his own heart beating in his ears, his chest heaving with every labored breath. The fight had already taken a heavy toll on him, his body battered and bruised. His movements were slower now, his energy drained, but his focus was sharper than ever. He knew Kor was still dangerous, still capable of turning the tables. Kor lay on the ground, his massive form twitching slightly as he recovered. The alien's face was twisted in a mixture of anger and disbelief. He had never met an opponent like this before, a human who refused to back down, who didn't collapse under the weight of his attacks. Kor's pride was shattered, and that made him more dangerous than ever. His eyes burned with fury, but there was also a hint of something else, a growing fear. The human had managed to outlast him, and that had never happened before. Jack slowly got to his feet, his body protesting the movement. His muscles ached, his skin burned where Kor had struck him, and his vision swam with the aftereffects of the blows he had taken. But he stood tall, his posture straight, his eyes locked on Kor. He was ready. He couldn't afford to let up now. If he did, Kor would make sure he paid for it. Kor snarled and rose to his feet with a primal growl, shaking off the dust and dirt. The gladiator was massive, his shoulders broad and his chest heaving with each breath. His tail lashed behind him, a sign of his growing frustration. He wasn't used to this being brought so low, having to fight for every inch of ground. He was a champion, a killer. And now, a mere human was standing in his way. The crowd, which had once cheered for Kor, was now silent, unsure of what to make of this unexpected turn of events. They had all thought the human would be nothing more than an easy target, a weakling to be crushed under Kor's feet. But here he was, still standing, still fighting, and the alien gladiator was the one on the defensive. Jack's eyes never left Kor. He could feel the sweat pouring down his face, could feel the ache in his arms, his legs, his entire body. But he didn't let it show. He had to keep going. He had to show these aliens that humanity was not to be underestimated, that they could fight, that they could win, even against overwhelming odds. Kor's eyes narrowed, his lips curling into a snarl. The alien charged again, moving faster this time, determined to crush the human once and for all. His fists swung. Like giant hammers, each strike aimed to end the fight. Jack could feel the air shifting as each blow came his way, and he knew that if any of them hit, it would be over for him. But Jack had learned something over the years. When you're faced with someone stronger, faster, and bigger, you don't try to match them head-on. You outsmart them. Jack sidestepped again, narrowly avoiding Kor's strike, and in that split second, he saw his chance. He dropped low, using his legs to propel himself forward. As he came up, he grabbed Kor's arm and twisted it behind the Gladiator's back with all his strength. The alien roared in pain, stumbling forward. Jack pressed his advantage, using the moment to drive his knee into Kor's side. The Gladiator grunted, but Jack didn't stop. He wasn't giving Kor chance to recover. Not this time. Kor tried to break free, but Jack held firm. The Gladiator's strength was still impressive, but it was starting to falter. He had underestimated the human, and now Jack had him where he wanted him. Jack twisted the alien's arm further, forcing Kor to his knees. The crowd gasped in astonishment. The Gladiator, the unbeatable champion, was on the ground, and the human was the one in control. Jack's breath was ragged as he held Kor down. He wasn't sure how much longer he could keep this up, but he wasn't going to let the alien get away. The fight was almost over. He could feel it. He could feel the weight of his victory just within reach. All he had to do was hold on. Kor's breathing grew shallow, and his face turned red with anger. His pride had been crushed, but he wasn't ready to admit defeat. He wouldn't let this human be the one to bring him down. With a sudden burst of strength, Kor slammed his tail into Jack's side, sending the human flying across the arena. Jack landed hard on his back, the wind knocked out of him. For a moment, he couldn't breathe, the world spinning around him. But he didn't stay down. He couldn't afford to. Kor was already getting back up, his eyes burning with fury. Jack's body was sore, but he forced himself to roll to his feet. He couldn't let Kor have the upper hand. Not now. Not after all he had been through. Jack took a deep breath and steadied himself. He wasn't going to give up. Not when he was so close to victory. He had come too far, fought too hard to let this alien win. He looked up at Kor, who was now towering over him, ready for another strike. But this time, Jack was ready. Kor lunged forward again, but Jack was already moving. He ducked low, avoiding the alien's attack, and then spun around, using his momentum to launch himself at Kor's back. The Gladiator grunted in surprise as Jack's body slammed into him, knocking him off balance once again. The massive alien staggered, his hands flailing as he tried to steady himself. But Jack wasn't finished. With a final burst of strength, he wrapped his arms around Kor's neck and used every ounce of his body weight to bring the Gladiator to the ground. The alien let out a cry of surprise and pain as his back hit the dirt, his massive frame crashing to the ground with a thundering sound. Jack held on tight, using his legs to lock Kor's body in place, preventing him from getting up. For a long moment, there was silence. The crowd waited, holding their breath, unsure of what would happen next. Kor struggled beneath Jack, his muscles straining, but Jack refused to let go. The alien's breath came in ragged gasps, and Jack could feel the desperation in the Gladiator's movements. He was finished. He just didn't know it yet. Jack's grip tightened, and he spoke, his voice steady and calm. "It's over, Kor. You've lost." The words echoed through the arena, and for the first time, Kor stopped struggling. His body went limp, and Jack knew that the fight was finally over. The human had won. Against all odds, Jack had defeated the Gladiator. The arena went completely quiet. The silence hung in the air like a thick fog. Then, slowly, the crowd began to cheer. The roar grew louder and louder until it filled the entire arena, shaking the ground beneath them. Jack stood over Kor, his chest heaving with exhaustion, but his face was calm. He had done it. He had won. And he had shown the galaxy that humanity was not to be underestimated. The arena was silent, and Jack stood there, his chest rising and falling with each breath. He had done it. He had defeated Kor, the 8-foot alien gladiator. The crowd was still, almost unsure of what they had just witnessed. The human had won. It didn't seem real. For so long, Kor had been untouchable, a warrior feared by all. And now, the human marine had humbled him. Jack stood tall, though his body ached with every movement. His muscles screamed in pain, his limbs heavy from the fight. But he didn't let it show. He had trained for this moment, prepared for the toughest battles, and now, standing victorious, he felt the weight of what he had accomplished. He had not just fought for himself, but for all of humanity. For Earth, he had proved that humans were not weak. They were strong. Stronger than anyone had ever realized. Kor lay at his feet, breathing heavily, his pride shattered. He had fought with everything he had, but it hadn't been enough. The human had taken him down with skill, with strategy, and with determination. The gladiator's face twisted in defeat as he struggled to rise, but his strength was gone. He had nothing left to give. The fight had drained him, and he now found himself at the mercy of the human he had once mocked. Jack looked down at the defeated gladiator, his face expressionless. He had earned this victory, but he wasn't here to gloat. He wasn't here to make Kor suffer. That wasn't the human way. Jack's eyes softened as he spoke, his voice steady but full of authority. "You've fought well, Kor, but this ends now. I'm not here to kill you. I'm here to show the galaxy that humanity can stand against anything." The alien gladiator's eyes flickered with disbelief, and then with something else. Was it respect, or was it fear? Jack couldn't tell. But Kor didn't speak. He didn't move. His body was beaten, his will broken. Jack stood tall, still holding the arena in silence. He had done what no one thought was possible. He had defeated the greatest fighter in the galaxy. The crowd began to murmur, and then slowly they started to cheer. At first it was hesitant, unsure, but as the moments passed, the roar grew louder. The aliens who had once laughed at the human, who had looked down on him, were now cheering for him. They had seen the strength, the heart, the power of humanity. They had seen something they hadn't expected. Jack didn't smile. He didn't need to. He knew what this victory meant. It wasn't just about the battle. It was about humanity's place in the galaxy. It was about showing the galaxy that humans were more than just a species to be ignored or dismissed. They were warriors capable of facing the strongest opponents. And coming out on top. Kor slowly pushed himself up, his muscles trembling. He glared at Jack, his face twisted with pride and frustration. He wanted to fight back, wanted to destroy the human for making him look weak, but he couldn't. Fight had drained him, and now he was too exhausted to even stand properly. Jack took a step back, watching as the gladiator struggled. He didn't have to do this. He didn't have to show mercy. But Jack was a Marine, and he knew the value of honor. He wasn't a killer, not by nature. He had fought to survive, but now he had a choice, and he chose mercy. He chose to show Kor that even in victory, humanity had compassion. "Get up, Kor," Jack said, his voice firm, but not cruel. "You're not dead. You're just beaten. Get up and show them what a real fighter looks like." Kor hesitated, his eyes flickering with anger, but also something else. There was a flicker of respect. He had been defeated, but not by weakness. He had been beaten by a human who had fought smarter, fought harder, and refused to give up. For the first time, Kor understood what it meant to be human. With a grunt of effort, Kor finally rose to his feet. His movements were slow, his body shaking with exhaustion, but he stood. He faced Jack, his head bowed, not in shame but in recognition of the human strength. Jack had done what no one had ever thought possible. He had made the alien gladiator acknowledge the power of humanity. The crowd was still cheering, and now Kor raised his head. For a brief moment, his eyes met Jack's. There was no more mockery in them, no more hatred. Instead, there was something that Jack could only describe as respect. The alien had lost, but he had learned something in the process. He had learned that humans were not weak, not easy to defeat. They were warriors in their own right. Kor took a step toward Jack, and for the first time, the crowd grew silent. What would happen next? Would Kor strike? Would he attack the human again? But no. The alien gladiator simply nodded, his face solemn, his pride still intact but tempered with humility. He raised his arms, showing the crowd that he accepted his defeat. He had lost, but he had learned. Jack stepped forward, extending his hand to the Gladiator. "We're not enemies, Kor. We're fighters, and we fight with honor." The arena was still. The tension in the air was thick, but then, slowly, the crowd began to cheer again. It wasn't just for Jack anymore. It was for both of them, the Gladiator and the human. The warrior who had lost and the one who had won, but had done so with respect and honor. Kor looked down at Jack's hand, then back up into his eyes. After a long pause, the alien reached out and took the human's hand. It was a gesture of acceptance, of understanding. And in that moment, the galaxy saw something new. It saw a human and an alien gladiator, once enemies, now standing together, united by mutual respect. The fight was over. The victory was won. But the true victory was the message they had sent. Humanity was here to stay. They were warriors, not just in battle, but in spirit. And no matter how big or powerful the enemy, humanity would always fight with everything it had. And in the end, that was what mattered most. The crowd's cheers grew louder, echoing across the arena, as Kor and Jack stood together. An unlikely pair in a galaxy that never expected this moment. For so long, humans had been underestimated, their strength doubted by alien races who had seen their own power as superior. But here, today, humanity had proven that they were not just survivors. They were fighters, warriors capable of standing toe-to-toe with the greatest. Jack stood beside Kor, still breathing heavily from the battle. His muscles burned, every step a reminder of how much the fight had taken out of him. He had been pushed to his limits and beyond, but he had done it. He had won, not just for himself, but for humanity. He had shown the galaxy that no matter how large, how strong, or how fierce the opponent, humans would always fight back. Kor, on the other hand, was still catching his breath, his massive frame exhausted from the struggle. His pride had been broken, but there was something else in his eyes now, respect. He looked down at Jack, the human who had outsmarted him, outlasted him, and defeated him when no one thought it possible. And in that respect, something had shifted. In the gladiator's mind, the alien warrior was no longer filled with anger or arrogance. Instead, he stood beside Jack, acknowledging the strength the human had shown. The cheers of the crowd began to die down, but the weight of the moment remained heavy. This was more than just a battle won. This was a statement to the entire galaxy. Humans were here, and they were not to be underestimated. The arena's announcer spoke, his voice booming over the loudspeakers. "Victory goes to the human marine. Let it be known that today, humanity has proven itself a force to be reckoned with." The crowd erupted into cheers once more. This time, there was no hesitation, no doubt. They cheered for Jack, but they also cheered for the victory that had been won, not just by one person, but by a species that had long been seen as weak. Jack had not just fought for himself. He had fought for every human who had ever been looked down on, every person who had ever been told they were not good enough. Jack's heart swelled with pride, but he didn't let it show. He wasn't here to be a hero. He was here to send a message. He had done what no one thought possible. He had stood tall against an alien gladiator and come out on top. But this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Humanity had shown what they were capable of. Now the galaxy would know better than to make the same mistake again. Kor, still standing beside him, finally spoke. His voice was low, almost hesitant. "You've earned my respect, human. I've never fought anyone like you." Jack turned to him, his expression calm but resolute. It wasn't about winning. It was about showing the galaxy that we're not weak. We fight with everything. We have no matter the odds. Kor nodded slowly, his gaze shifting to the cheering crowd. "I see that now. I have fought many battles, but none like this. You fought with honor, with strategy. You didn't rely on strength alone." The two stood there for a moment, sharing a rare understanding between two warriors who had once been enemies. Jack could feel the weight of the moment, the significance of what had just happened. This wasn't just a fight. It was a turning point, not just for him, but for all of humanity. The galaxy would never forget this day. The announcer's voice rang out once again, this time with a new declaration. The victor of today's match will be honored as the first human to be granted a place in the Galactic tournament. A victory for humanity, a victory for Earth. Jack's heart skipped a beat. The Galactic tournament was a prestigious event, one where only the most skilled warriors from across the galaxy were invited to participate. It was a chance for humanity to prove its worth on a larger stage, to show the universe that they belonged. And now, Jack was going to be the one to represent humanity. The realization hit him like a wave. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He wasn't just fighting for his own survival. He was fighting for Earth, for the future of humanity in a galaxy that had never believed in their potential. The weight of that responsibility settled on his shoulders, but he didn't hesitate. He would take this opportunity. He would show the galaxy that humanity was a force that couldn't be ignored. Korr stepped forward, his massive hand clapping Jack on the back. The force of the gesture almost sent Jack stumbling forward, but he steadied himself. The Gladiator smiled, a rare sight for someone known for his fierce demeanor. You will make a fine warrior for your people, human. I will watch you in the tournament. Jack gave him a small nod, grateful for the alien's respect. Thank you, Korr. I'll do my best. With that, the two turned to face the crowd, their eyes meeting in silent acknowledgement of what they had both just accomplished. The arena erupted in cheers once again, this time with a new sense of admiration for the human who had stood tall against the galaxy's greatest warriors. As Jack walked out of the arena, his mind raced with the realization of what lay ahead. The Galactic tournament. It was a chance to prove humanity's place among the stars, a chance to show the universe that humans were more than just survivors. They were fighters, warriors who could stand against anything the galaxy threw at them. He had earned the respect of Korr. He had earned the respect of the galaxy. But now, the real challenge was about to begin. The tournament would be unlike anything he had faced before. He would have to fight against the best the galaxy had to offer. But Jack wasn't afraid. He had already faced the greatest challenge of his life and come out on top. Now he would face the tournament, and he would fight with everything he had. Future of humanity in the galaxy had just begun, and Jack was ready to lead the charge.